Hello friends, myself Praveen Pathak. I welcome you all on my YouTube channel for the series of lectures which are focusing on the basics of industrial safety. So there are lots of courses like advanced diploma, post diploma, post graduation diploma, certification courses which are focusing on the fire safety, energy and environment, safety and environment, security and safety, security and management, etc. So, most of the certificate or diploma courses involved the legislation as a major part in their syllabus or curriculum contents. From that point of view, I am going to start the series of lectures on the legislation first, and then I will try to cover the other aspects like safety, health, environment management, safety in engineering, construction industries, chemical industries, quality control, etc. So, from today, I would like to start the first lecture of the legislation, that is on the introduction of Factory Act 1948, because as far as the industry or industrial safety is concerned, the main part of the legislation is Factory Act. So what exactly the Factory Act? Let us start the lecture now. Factory legislation became essential when the factory owners began to exploit men, women, children by taking work from them in complete disregard of their health and strength. So, before a century, the health and safety were not the major concern, and from that point of view, the Factory Act is essential. So, it is started from 1881. The Factory Act is a social legislation dealing with the main three elements, that is safety, health and welfare of workers. It is the oldest labor legislation which enforces ratified ILO conventions, that is International Labour Organization, permits state governments to make rules. So, for example, if the Maharashtra state is there, then Maharashtra state is going to make the rules under the guidelines of Factory Act. So, what exactly the Factory Act contains or focuses? In the 1881, the British mill owners cried foul over stringency of legislation in GB and forced British India to pass Factory Act 1881. Then it is changed or amended in 1891 for the main focus, that is of 1 weekly off day, limited hours of employment of women and children. Then it is amended in 1911, that is for the comprehensive provisions to bring seasonal factories at par with the factories in the Bombay Residency. And then the self regulation principle is exist in the 1948, and then the Factory Act 1948 comes in exist. So it is amended extensively in 1976 and 1970 87. So what is the difference between the Factory Act and Factory Rule? So the basic difference is Factory Act is a central legislation, and the elements which involved under the Factory Act are called as sections. Factory rule is adaptation of model by the state. So different states having different factory rules. For example, Maharashtra state is having Maharashtra Factory Rule 1963, and the elements or the contents under that is called as rule. The Factory Act is an umbrella legislation covering all aspects of industrial establishment. But in Factory Rule, it is specific to the requirement of state. So it is focuses only on the requirements of state, that is Factory Rule. But Factory Act is concerned at a national level. Then Factory Act enactment through DG Fastly and enforced by the DISH. DG Fastly is nothing but the Director General of Factory Advice and Central Labour Institute. And Factory Rule Details requirement of act always read in conjunction of act. So the rules are designed or made under the guidelines of Factory Act only. So with reference to the sections, the detailed guidelines are made under the factory rule, and it is enforced by the state, that is DISH, Department of Industrial Safety and Health. So in the Factory Act 1948, there are 11 chapters, 120 sections, and 4 schedules are involved. So in the chapter 1, which is focuses, or the title of the chapter is preliminary aspects only. So there are 7 sections where chapter 1 is involved. So under the 7 sections, there are some important sections like section 1 extent, section 2 interpretation, section 6 approval or licensing, section 7 duties of occupier, etc. So each chapter contains some sections, and every section focuses on a particular topic or subtopic, and then the detailing is given under that section. Then the chapter 2 focuses on the inspecting staff, and that is covered under the section 8, 9 and 10. That is, section 8 is of inspector, 9 power of inspectors, 10 is of certifying surgeons. Then chapter 3 focuses on the health aspects. So we have already discussed that Factory Act focuses on the main 3 elements: safety, health and welfare. So one of the chapter is concerned with the health only. So health of the workers. So section 11 to 20 are related with the health. For example, cleanliness, disposal of waste, ventilation and temperatures, dust and fumes, lighting, latrines and urinals, spitons, which are the different section, are related to the health. So what should be the level of cleanliness, what is the technique of disposal of waste, what are the ventilations and temperature conditions should be there to avoid the risk or reduce the health of worker. So these are the different guidelines given this under the different sections and covered under the chapter 3, that is called as health. Then chapter 4 focuses only on the safety. So that is the 3 element: health, safety, welfare. So one chapter is on the health, second now the chapter is on the safety. So chapter number 4 is focuses on the safety, and section 21 to 41 are involved under the safety chapter. For example, some of the sections are fencing of machinery. So how to provide fencing, when to provide fencing, what are the guidelines are given, that is one of the section under the safety. Devices for cutting of power, hoist and lifts, what are the testing standards, testing certificates, duration, expiry, etc. What is the competent person for the testing, etc. Then lifting machines, tackles, pressure plants, floors, stairs, means of access, pits, sumps, opening in floors, etc. Then excessive weights, protection of eyes, precautions against dangerous fumes, gases, etc. Then precautions against portable electric lights, precautions in case of fires, safety officers. What is the basic requirement of safety officer? That is under section 40B. So for the 1000 worker or minimum 1000 worker, minimum one safety officer should be there. That is one of the aspects under the section 40B. And for the remaining conditions, that if the industry is hazardous, or if the industry is having dangerous operations, or if the dangerous operations plus major accident hazard unit is there, then the requirement of safety officer is different, and that is depend on the state government. So all these things are involved under the chapter 4, that is safety. I am just taking the some of or few examples for a particular section. Then chapter 4a focuses on the provisions related to the hazardous processes. So hazardous process definition is involved in the section 2cb, and now the provision related to that hazardous process involved under the section 41a to h. So some examples of these sections are site appraisal committee, compulsory disclosure of information by occupier, specific responsibilities of occupier, emergency standards, limits of exposure, workers' participation in safety management, rights of worker to warn about imminent danger. So these are the some of the sections which involved under the chapter 4A, that is provision related to hazardous process. Now chapter 5 is focuses on the welfare. So that is one of the major element from the Factory Act point of view. So one is safety, second is health, and third is welfare. So welfare chapter is 5. So under that chapter, section 42 to 50 are involved. In that, washing facilities, facilities for seating, canteens, shelters, restroom, lunchroom, creches, welfare officers, etc. are given. So some guidelines: how many canteens should be there? For one canteen, at least minimum worker number, or the crutches, for how many women's the crutches should be there, or essential or compulsory, or what type of washing facilities should be there in the industry, etc. So all these discussions under section 42 to 50, that is under chapter 5 under the title welfare. In the chapter 6, working hours of adults, so it covers section 51 to 66. So weekly hours, weekly holidays, compensatory holidays, daily hours, interval of rest, spread over, night shift, prohibition of overlapping shifts, extra wages for overtime, prohibition, etc. All these sections are discussed under the chapter 6. Then chapter 7 focuses on the employment of young persons, that is from section 67 to 77. Prohibition of employment of young children, certificates of fitness, hours of work to correspond with notice under section 72 and register under section 73. Then power to require medical examination, power to make rules are all the discussion under the chapter 7. And chapter 8 focuses on the annual leave with wages, that is section 78 to 84. Some of the sections are annual leave with wages, wages during leave period. Then Factory Act 1948 chapter 9 focuses on the special provisions, that is section 85 to 91E. Some of the sections are power of exemptions, dangerous operations, notice of certain accidents, notice of dangerous occurrences, notice of certain diseases, power to direct inquiry, and chapter 10 focuses on the penalties and procedures. So section 92 to 106A is under chapter 10, and some of the sections are general penalties, penalties for obstructing inspector, penalty for contraventions of 41 BCH, offences by workers, exemptions of occupier or manager in certain cases, cognizance of offence, limitations of prosecutions. And last chapter, that is chapter 11, is supplemental provision, and that is section 107 to 120. Some of the sections are appeal, obligation of workers, right of worker, etc. So these are the 11 chapters and 120 sections covered under the Factory Act 1948. So there are 4 schedules under the Factory Act 1948. First schedule is focuses on the list of industries involving hazardous processes. So this first schedule is focuses on the hazardous processes. So there are 29 hazardous processes which are listed under this schedule, and the reference for this hazardous process is section 2CB. So the definition of hazardous process is given under section 2CB, and the example or the list of industries involving hazardous processes is given in the first schedule. For example, ferrous metallurgical industries, non-ferrous metallurgical industries, foundries, coal, power generating industries, pulp and paper, fertilizer, cement industry, petroleum industry, petrochemical industries, drug and pharmaceutical, fermentation, rubber, paint, pigment, leather tanning, electroplanting, chemical industries, then insecticide, fungicide, synthetic resins, man-made fibers, manufacture and repair of electrical accumulators, glass and ceramics, grinding or glassing of metals, manufacturing, handling, processing of asbestos, extraction of oils and fats from vegetables and animal sources, manufacturing, handling of benzene, manufacturing process operation under carbon disulfide, dyes and dye stuff, high flammable liquids and gases. These are the 29 hazardous processes which are under the first schedule. Now the second schedule. The second schedule focuses on the permissible levels of certain chemical substances in the work environment. So where we are working or the employer or worker are working, that is called as work environment. So in the work environment, what should be the permissible level of a chemical substance? So that is given under the second schedule. For example, suppose acetaldehyde is there. So the permissible level for the acetaldehyde for the time weighted average concentration, that is called as TWA, that means for the 8 hours work environment, the limit is 100 ppm and 180 mg per meter cube. So if any worker is working for the 8 hours and if the acetaldehyde is the substance which is involved in the working environment, then maximum permissible limit by the second schedule of Factory Act is 100 ppm or 180 mg per meter cube. In case if the working environment is same, acetaldehyde is the substance, and if only 15-minute exposure is there, then it is called as short term exposure limit, then it is stale value. So for the 15-minute the stale value is different for the same substance. Now it is 150 ppm instead of 100 and 270 mg per meter cube instead of 180. So if the 15 minutes stale value is there, then the ppm mg per meter cube values are different for the different substances. So these are the permissible limits of exposure. It is also called as PEL values or PL limits. So these are the PL values given for the chemical substances in work environment, and there are different substances which are listed under this second schedule. Then the third schedule focuses on the list of notifiable diseases. So the reference for the notifiable diseases are section 89 and 90. The list of notifiable diseases are given in the third schedule, like lead poisoning, lead tetraethyl poisoning, phosphorus poisoning, mercury poisoning, manganese poisoning, arsenic poisoning, nitrous fume poisoning, carbon bisulfide, benzene poisoning, chrome ulceration, anthrax, silicosis, poisoning by halogens, pathological malfunction due to radium or X-rays, then primary epitheliomatous, cancer of the skin, toxic anemia, toxic jaundice, oil acne, biciniosis, asbestosis, occupational or contact dermatitis, then noise induced hearing loss, then beryllium poisoning, carbon monoxide poisoning, coal miners pneumoconiosis, phosgene poisoning, occupational cancer, isocyanate poisoning, toxic nephrites. These are the 29 notifiable diseases listed in the third schedule. So the fourth schedule is exists from 2015, and it is focuses on the compoundable offenses. So the sections and rules are given under the Factory Act, and with respect to that particular section or the rule, the offenses are given. So the fourth schedule focuses on the compoundable offenses. For example, section 11 cleanliness is there. No maintaining cleanliness as per the provisions. If the cleanliness is not maintained as per the section 11, then it is acts as a offense and some penalty or provision is there. So likewise, for the drinking water facility, latrine facility, urinal facilities, spitons, washing facility, etc., there are 33 sections and rules where you can observe the not provision or not maintenance for that particular section, and the compoundable offenses is existence, and you can go for the provision of penalty or some punishment. So these are the four schedules which are under the Factory Act. So up till now we have covered that what is Factory Act, from where the Factory Act started, the history of Factory Act. Then there are 11 chapters in the Factory Act. There are 120 sections under the Factory Act. There are 4 schedules under the Factory Act, and these are the some of the rules under Factory Act 1948. That is Maharashtra Factory Rule 1963, then Maharashtra Safety Officer Rule 1982, then Maharashtra Welfare Officer Rule 1966, the Dangerous Machine Act 1983, the Dangerous Machine Rule 2007, the Maharashtra Factory SEMA Rule 2003. So these are the rules which are under the Factory Act 1948. So we will discuss the details of all these sections and rules in the other lectures. So till that, thank you.